Once upon a time, in the land of Igbo tribe in the southeastern region of Nigeria in West Africa, there lived a beautiful girl from a wealthy family named Afiong. Her beauty was known far and wide, and many young men in the village admired her. Everyone hoped to marry her, but Afiong was very proud. She refused to marry any man, no matter how rich or kind he was, because she believed no one was good enough for her. Her parents, especially her father, were worried. They told Afiong that a woman should marry while she was still young, but Afiong would not listen. She told her parents, "I will only marry the most handsome and strongest man in the land. No one else deserves me." Many men came to ask for her hand in marriage, but Afiong turned them all away. She judged them by their looks, calling some too old, others too short, and many too plain. Her parents were upset and begged her to stop being so vain, but she ignored their pleas. In a faraway place called the Spirit Land, a creature called the Skull heard about Afiong's beauty and how she refused all her suitors. The Skull was a spirit, and in his natural form, he was ugly, with no proper body. But he wanted Afiong to be his wife. So, he went to other spirits and borrowed the best parts of their bodies, a head from one spirit, strong arms from another, fine legs from a third, and a steady body from yet another. When he put all these parts together, the Skull looked like the most handsome man anyone had ever seen. The Skull then traveled to the market, where Afiong often was, knowing that she would notice him. Indeed, when Afiong heard about this incredibly handsome stranger in the market, she rushed to see him. The moment she laid eyes on him, she was smitten. He was everything she had ever wanted, tall, strong, and beautiful. Without hesitation, Afiong invited him to her house, excited to show her parents this fine man. Her parents, however, were suspicious. They didn't know where this stranger had come from and were uncomfortable with how quickly Afiong had taken to him. They asked him many questions, but the Skull answered them all charmingly. Eventually, her parents agreed to the marriage, but they were still worried. 2 days later, the Skull told Afiong that it was time for him to take her back to his home. Afiong was eager to go, even though her parents warned her. "You don't even know where he comes from," her father said. "Stay a little longer and get to know him better." But Afiong, stubborn and proud, refused. "I love him, and he is the man I've been waiting for," she insisted. So, they left together. As they walked, the landscape began to change. The trees grew darker, the air colder, and Afiong started to feel uneasy. "Where are we going?" she asked, her confidence slipping. "We are almost there," the Skull replied with a smile that no longer seemed as charming. After days of walking, they crossed into the Spirit Land. Afiong noticed strange figures in the distance, shadowy shapes moving along the road. Suddenly, a man approached them and demanded the Skull return the legs he had borrowed. Without a word, the Skull removed his legs and handed them over, leaving Afiong shocked and terrified. The Skull fell to the ground, dragging himself along. Then another spirit appeared and demanded the arms. The Skull gave them away, and Afiong could barely breathe, her heart racing with fear. One by one, all the borrowed body parts were returned, until all that was left was the Skull in its true form, an ugly, hollow head. Afiong screamed in horror, realizing she had been tricked. "You are mine now," the Skull hissed. "You cannot go back." The Skull dragged Afiong to his home, a dark and gloomy place where his mother, a frail old woman, lived. The old woman could hardly walk, and Afiong was forced to care for her, cooking and cleaning while fearing for her life. The old woman, however, grew fond of Afiong. She noticed that despite her fear, Afiong was kind to her and did not complain about her difficult life. One day, the old woman said, "My child, I know you do not belong here. This is the land of spirits, and soon the others will find out you are human. If they do, they will kill you and eat you." Afiong's heart sank. "What can I do?" she asked, tears filling her eyes. The old woman sighed and said, "Because you have been kind to me, I will help you escape. But you must promise me one thing: when you return home, you must always obey your parents." Afiong nodded quickly, filled with both hope and regret. "I promise," she said. The next day, the old woman called a spider, who was known to be the best hairdresser in the spirit world. The spider carefully styled Afiong's hair in a way that would make her look like a spirit, so she could travel unnoticed. Then the old woman gave Afiong beautiful anklets and bracelets as a reward for her kindness. Finally, the old woman used her magic to summon the winds. A violent tornado arrived fast, spinning with great force, but the old woman sent it away, saying it was too dangerous. Next, a strong gust of wind came, but it, too, was unsuitable. At last, a gentle breeze appeared, soft and calm. "This wind will carry you home," the old woman said. She then bid Afiong farewell and told her to always remember the promise she had made. Afiong felt a lightness as the breeze lifted her gently off the ground. In moments, she was flying through the air, back over the dark trees and cold roads, until finally, she saw her village below. The breeze set her down softly outside her family's home. When Afiong's parents saw her standing at the door, they couldn't believe their eyes. They had thought she was dead. Her father, overjoyed, spread animal skins on the ground so that her feet would not touch the bare earth as she walked into the house. For days, the family celebrated Afiong's return. Her friends from the village came to dance and sing, and there was feasting and joy. But Afiong was different now. She was no longer the vain, disobedient girl who had left with a stranger. She was grateful to be home and realized how much her family meant to her. When the celebrations were over, her father spoke to the village chief. He told him everything that had happened, and the chief made a new law. From that day forward, no daughter from the village was allowed to marry a stranger from a faraway land without careful consideration. Afiong, now wiser and humbled, married a man her father had long approved of. She lived happily with him, grateful for the second chance she had been given, and always remembered to obey her parents and respect their wisdom. And so, the story of the disobedient daughter who married a skull was told from generation to generation, a reminder that vanity and disobedience come with great risks, and the love of family should never be taken for granted. So, what did you learn from this Igbo folktale? Please let me know in the comment section.